Sorry about that. So regarding Eblite, the most prominent feature that people talk about to distinguish it from Akkadian that we know of is Bart's Law. Does anyone remember what Bart's Law is? As opposed to Bart Ginsburg's Law, which is a different one.
I'm really bad with all the names of the laws, but I think it's the dissimilation of ma before a labial on the root.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. So, for example, if we have the prefix ma before a root that has a labial in it, like rakaba, in Akkadian, the ma will change to na, so narkab to an Akkadian would be a chariot, but in Eblite, this rule does not happen, and it's malkab to. Is it impossible, for example, like this kind of rule would be a rule that I think is a little bit easier to borrow from one language to the other. It's relatively transparent. It's relatively easy to derive. And I would not be surprised, for example, even with loan words, like I'm absolutely sure, maybe I'm the only one, but I'm absolutely sure that some words in Hebrew that are borrowed from Akkadian would be with this shift. And if there were just enough borrowings with this shift, it would not be impossible for a language to adopt such a rule as a borrowing rather than a retention. But it's nice that we don't see it in Eblite, and that helps us determine that Eblite and Akkadian are either separate dialects of Akkadian or separate languages, whichever you prefer. And then we have the Babylonian Assyrian thing. So of course we have these slight differences in the pronouns. For Babylonian shu, we have Assyrian shut. The accusative or dative pronouns, which is also interesting and maybe corresponds to what I said earlier about form versus function. So we have this form shunuti, for example, that has the function of oblique, meaning accusative and genitive in Babylonian, but dative in Assyrian. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And we have the different verbal vowels in the D and the sheen. So, for example, in the D, it's in Babylonian, the stative is purus and the imperative is puris, but in Assyrian, the stative is parus and the imperative is paris. So the first vowel is u in Babylonian and a in Assyrian, and the same thing goes for the sheen stem, if I am not mistaken. And when we look at peripheral Akkadian outside Assyrian and Babylonian, we see that it has a significant substrate of the local language or the other language spoken or whatever, the native language or however you want to call it. So for example, in Amarna, we can see forms that adhere to Canaanite grammar alongside Canaanite words in Bogashkoi for Hittite and Muzi for Hurrian, and so on. So obviously, this classifies these different dialects as not only different dialects, but in addition to retaining certain features and innovating certain features and losing certain features from Akkadian, they have their share of retentions and innovations from their own inherited bank of features of language that they had from their own. I hope that was clear. Any question? Okay. If we look at West Semitic, we have the regular separation that I think, or at least hope, that we've discussed so much until now that you've remembered it already. So we have modern South Arabian and Ethio-Semitic that are characterized by both a retention of Iparas and no innovation of Yapusu. And according to Chetzron's principles, that would make them not good enough to be one branch. So the fact that they have retained this form and have not innovated the other form does not necessarily mean that they have a shared ancestor that is closer to them than to the other languages in the branch. On the other hand, we have Central Semitic, which is characterized by its fair share of innovations, the mood system, Bart Ginsburg's law, which no one really knows if it's Central Semitic or bigger than that or smaller than that, but most people think it's Central Semitic. Does anyone remember what Bart Ginsburg's law is? Should be with his set. It's the law that determines the vowel of the prefix in the prefix conjugation. So, for example, yipras as opposed to yaprus. This feature can be found in Hebrew and in Aramaic and in certain dialects of Arabic, but never across the board, only marginally or residually. So it is thought to be a feature that has been eventually lost, but must be older. Also, it can be found in Ugaritic. I think they're even a little bit more centrally. And we have some other features like the definite article that is somewhat characteristic of Central Semitic. Most of them prefix, some of them suffix, but they all have a definite article, at least from some point in time. Pharyngealized.
Ugaritic doesn't,
Yes,
right?
yes, you're right. That's why I said
You,
at least from some point in time. That's absolutely true. So for like
okay.
first millennium and after that, true, Ugaritic does not have, and also the earliest inscriptions, both in Hebrew and in Aramaic, don't use it very often. So it does seem to have been development from after that. Pharyngalization, which we don't know exactly if occurred in the epigraphical languages like Ugaritic or Old South Arabian, but we do know this from Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic, so that the adjectives have at some point shifted to pharyngalized or backed consonants. And we have this feature of the loss of the feminine T in some environments. So in each language, it has functioned a little bit differently. But we can find it in Hebrew and in Canaanite in general, in Hebrew and Aramaic, and in certain dialects of Arabic. Actually, I think all spoken dialects of Arabic have had this feature, but literary Arabic or modern standard Arabic, not exactly. So it's one of those things that is a direct result of the Quran thing that I don't know. I don't remember if I've spoken about it, but obviously, whoever has written the Quran and whoever has vocalized it had different dialects. Have I mentioned this? So there are these not very few features in Arabic orthography that stem from this fact that I've just mentioned, that whoever has written the Quran has written it in his own dialect, and whoever has vocalized it made what he thought were corrections or changes in order to make it more like his dialect. And the latter one is more like modern standard or classical Arabic. And there are certain rules that obviously were forced upon the Quranic text. So one of them is the cancellation of the loss of feminine T, which is like in classical Arabic, there is no loss of the feminine T. It's there, but it's written weird. Like, I don't know, you probably have heard that it is written with this special letter that looks exactly like hey, but with the two dots above it. Obviously, the two dots were not there originally, so it was just hey. So there was a loss of feminine T, but whoever vocalized it said, I don't want this loss. It is not fasih, it does not sound well to my ears, so I will add it. And there are also other kinds of features like that. Also, the loss of aleph. So I don't know if you've studied Arabic orthography, but there are many, many rules to how to spell a glottal stop, depending on the vowels before and after it. And these all stem from the fact that there was much less glottal stops, or many of them were lost in the actual Quranic text or actual dialect of whoever has written the Quran. So many places where he would just not write any letter, they would have to add a certain letter to signify the glottal stop. And there's also the aerial group of South Semitic, which we've also already discussed deeply. So we have the p, the f shift, we have the broken plurals, we have the L stem, and in some of them we also have the kaf suffix conjugation. Any question? Just a second, sorry. Yeah, never mind. No, nothing. Jonathan, you seem worried for something. You have a question? No? Everything clear? So some of these features are better for classification and some aren't. If we look only at innovations, we can try and divide them onto innovations that are more likely to happen coincidentally. So for example, the put of shift is obviously like considered completely an aerial shift, but even if it weren't, it is much more likely to have happened coincidentally. Like many languages in the world have undergone this shift from p to f. So it's not that crazy or special, or it's not like the development of a mood system, which is like much harder to justify as a coincidence, or broken plurals for that matter. Any question? No, nothing? Okay. Within Ethio-Semitic, we have these important features. This is also from the work of Chetzon, which was a specialist in Ethio-Semitic, and he based a lot of his thoughts about the classification of Ethio-Semitic. So first of all, we have the division between non-South and South Ethio-Semitic. Does anyone remember which languages are in which? There are only 3 languages in the non-South Ethio-Semitic group, which is Ge'ez, the old one, and the 2 northern one, Tigre and Tigrinya, both spoken in the north of Ethiopia and in Eritrea. They are characterized by gemination in the imperfect, so ipagas, essentially, just like in modern South Arabian and in Akkadian, while the more southern languages like Amharic and all the other ones don't have gemination in the imperfect of the type A, so the regular G stem. They have different systems there, but they all have gemination in the perfect. All of them that have retained gemination as a feature have gemination in the perfect. So the perfect of the G stem has essentially assimilated to the perfect of the D stem. Everything clear so far? And this is once again a feature that is not thought to have been likely to have happened as a coincidence. So it's thought to have been an innovation that was inherited by all of these languages. Now, these 2 groups are, this group, the South Ethio-Semitic group, is divided onto 2 groups further, and they are called by Chetzon the transversal Ethio-Semitic, transversal South Ethio-Semitic, and outer South Ethio-Semitic. These are quite confusing names, but what's important is that the transversal languages have the compound imperfect, which we've talked about in the context of Amharic. So they add a certain auxiliary verb in the suffix conjugation to the prefix conjugation to create a certain imperfect that is for main verbs. So yisebral means he is breaking or he will break as a regular main verb, as opposed to yisebr without the suffix that would be that he breaks or will he break or let him break and so forth. Is that clear? Another feature that that Chetzuan mentions for these languages is that they have lost the feminine plural suffixes in the suffix conjugation. So what in non-South Ethio-Semitic or in the outer South Ethio-Semitic would be Iprusu, Iprusa, or something like that, like in Akkadian, like Yenegeru, Yenegera, just Yenegeru in transversal South Ethio-Semitic. But this is a feature that is much more likely to have been borrowed / likely to have developed through coincidence. So we know this from many other Semitic languages, and an analogy from the masculine plural to the feminine plural is likely, unlike the first feature that I've mentioned. Any questions so far? Okay, within this transversal group, so we have Amharic and Agoba. Agoba is very similar to Amharic. And then we have Harari, which is the language spoken in Haral, and the language group called East Gurage. And Harari and East Gurage have these features to classify them closer to each other. So first of all, they have a relative compound perfect. So instead of using the compound imperfect for the main verb and just the regular imperfect for the non-main verb, they have taken the main verb and added another suffix to it to make it a relative compound imperfect, which does not make a lot of sense, but is also not very likely to be a coincidence. So they essentially have lost the simple form, the form without the original suffix. They all have palatalization in the D stem, which some argue make it more likely for these languages to be related to Ge'ez, because Ge'ez has an A vowel in the D stem, unlike other Ethio-Semitic languages. But Ge'ez does not have palatalization, so we don't know. And they have lost gemination as a feature, which of course makes it a little bit more difficult for them to be classified according to their gemination. But we'll set that aside. Any other question? Any question? Anything?
I have a question. What's the etymology of the suffix in this form is sabral?
The al, it comes from halewe. Oh, sorry. So for some reason I can't do the, but it's something like this. In Gez, it means to be or to stay in some place, and this has become the regular verb of existence or of location in Ethio-Semitic languages. So it's ale. No, not ale, sorry, alle. Yeah.
Okay.
And the outer South Ethio-Semitic language group is just the rest of Gurage, which means not east, so West Gurage and North Gurage. And these are characterized by not having this compound imperfect, but instead having this this imperfect form, the yesebr, with a different suffix that is the main verb marker, which is either un or ut, with the u being optional. And in accordance, this language group is divided to the N group and the TT group, according to which suffix it uses. And they also have gemination of post-vocalic pronominal suffixes, but this is a phonetic or phonological phenomenon that is much easier to justify and much more common cross-linguistically. So once again, it is not a feature very good for classification. I hope it's very, very clear that like how we use features to classify languages now. Like I've given a lot of examples. I hope everyone understands, and if there's any question, please let me know. Now, when we talk about Semitic in general, I just remember that I don't think I've stressed this point enough, or not even sure I've mentioned it. That we have, if we want to look at Semitic as opposed to other Afroasiatic languages, or at Afroasiatic as opposed to other language families in the world, one of the features that stands out is that there are rules for the structure of a root. And it is not necessarily that these roots, a root with a first and third consonant that are identical, or a first and second consonant that are identical, are not existing. So there are these roots, but they are much, 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 much less common than this type of root, which is very, very common. So this is one of the features that is not likely to be coincidental, because this is not, at least not thought to be a pan or cross-linguistically attested phenomenon. But this is some kind of feature that is common among the Semitic languages. Any question about this? Does anyone remember what OCP stands for, or what it means? So OCP is the cross-linguistic tendency for obligatory contour. So obligatory contour principle, which means that two identical or very similar, I don't know, arguments or things do not like to be around each other. So what people think about in order to explain these forms is that in this form and in this form, there are two identical or similar things adjacent to each other or in the same morpheme. But in this form, which looks exactly the same, in the third one, it's different actually, because we have one thing, and this thing is reduplicated. So as weird as that may sound, this is how it is usually understood within Semitic studies, that these roots are to some extent only consisting of two elements in which the latter one is reduplicated, while these roots do not have reduplication in them. Is everything clear? I think that is it for our talk about classification, and I wanted to go through a little bit of what we have spoken about in this course in general, just to mention some points that I thought were important, and to ask if everything is understood, maybe raise some questions. So groupings, I hope, is a little bit more fresh because we've spoken about this today, but I hope everyone remembers what these names mean and a little bit about them. So Proto-Semitic is the abstract concept or tool that we use in order to quantify distances and similarities between different Semitic languages. So it's not a language that we actually reconstruct as a historical entity or something like that, but just a model that we use to understand the shared feature bank of these languages. And in general, the distinction between central languages and peripheral languages, I think, has proven useful, because we see that certain things happen in the center of places and spread from there, and they don't necessarily reach the edges, or even if they do reach the edges, they don't reach them at the same time, and they don't affect them to the same extent as the center. So the example I gave was the debuccalization of the sibilant in certain morphemes. So for example, in the third person pronouns, we have sheen in Akkadian, and we have hey in West Semitic, but in the non-Sabbaic Old South Arabian languages and in modern South Arabian, we also have sheen. So these languages are peripheral because this innovation of debuccalization has not reached them at the same time or to the same extent. Or for example, the sheen of the causative. We know that Ugaritic has retained the sheen of the causative, unlike all other West Semitic languages, also Ugaritic and non-Sabbaic Old South Arabian. So once again, these are at the edges, the northern edge, or the northwestern edge and the southeastern edge. And these languages have not gone through the same process because they are in the periphery. And the actual groups of languages that people talk about are East Semitic, Ethio-Semitic, Modern South Arabian, Old South Arabian, North Arabian, including Arabic, and Northwest Semitic. Any question regarding the groupings of Semitic languages? So everything is completely clear. Everyone knows exactly what each of these is and which languages it includes. I'm very happy to hear. Some important points from our talks about phonology. So does anyone remember the difference between a UR and a PR, or what these stand for?
I think UR would have been the underlying representation, but I don't remember what PR would be.
Exactly. So PR is phonetic representation or surface representation. Very, very good. So this is what we assume the speaker has in their mind. It's an abstract concept. It's an abstract system of what we call phonological rules, inventories, and so forth. While the PR and the allophones, these have surface existence. These can be actually studied and measured, but we use these in order to study these. So we use the PR in order to study the UR. I hope that was clear. Minimal pairs are just pairs of words that have only one tiny difference between them, usually one feature or one sound. And these are useful for distinguishing an important sound or a phoneme from a non-important sound. So a non-important sound would be, for example, if I say, if I say in English this or this, then I don't know, maybe it sounds a little bit weird, but people would still understand me. So it's not the difference between this sounds is certainly not as important as if I say this as opposed to cis or something like that. So these would change the word that I'm saying, while this would be the same word still. Assimilation and dissimilation are different processes that we've seen happen. Assimilation only happens when the two segments are adjacent to each other, while dissimilation only happens when they are non-adjacent. And assimilation of two non-adjacent segments is called harmony. The motivation of assimilation or harmony is usually that of, it could be overlapping gestures, so that we do certain things with our mouths, that it is easier for us to leave, for example, the nasal cavity open, or to leave the tongue in a certain position when we create another sound. So it saves us time or effort, so to speak, or we just don't control it. So that's how these things usually happen, like voicing assimilation. If we leave the voicing, the vocal cords open or not, and so forth. While the motivation for dissimilation is usually different, it can be perceptive. So dissimilating two segments can be useful for their prominence or perceptibility. Everything clear? A distinctive feature is a very important notion or thought or term used in phonology, but much wider than phonology, actually. So looking at two things or essences or entities in a language as comprised of different features, and to be different entities, they must differ in at least one feature. So it's an important notion. So for example, if we look at, I don't know, Samech and Zayin, these two are completely identical. They have the same features except for one feature, which is the voice feature. And that the voice feature is what distinguishes them. And from that, we can deduce that voicing is a distinctive feature in Semitic languages. Everything clear so far? Any question about all of the phonology that we've spoken about during the past semester and today? Just for reminding. And debuccalization is, as I've already mentioned, the shift from a certain sound to no sound, or usually a place of articulation to no place. So, for example, we know from Semitic a lot of the changes from sibilant to zero or glottal, and the terms used to describe the syllable. So we have the onset, which is not mandatory in all of the languages, but in Semitics, it is generally mandatory. We have, which is like the consonant at the beginning of the syllable. We have the nucleus, which is in Semitic languages, the vowel in the middle of the syllable. And we can have the coda, which is the consonant at the end of the syllable. Any question whatsoever, please feel free. Okay, so just some reminders from morphology. We've spoken a lot of the G stem, which is the basic stem in Semitic languages, the basic verbal stem. A verbal stem is this pattern to which we pour the root in order to create an inflecting verb. And this stem is mainly characterized by tense and also by mood in certain languages. We have the difference between a derivational morphology and inflectional morphology. Does anyone remember this difference? Or maybe I haven't mentioned it, I'm not sure. Yes.
Inflectional I don't know how to put this like in a good way, but inflectional morphology is basically it remains the same. It becomes a different form of the same word, whereas derivational morphology basically creates a new word.
Exactly correct. That is exactly correct. For example, in Semitic languages, we have inflection for number and for gender in nouns and adjectives, and also for person in verbs, and derivational to create a new word. So there are many different ways to create a new word, but it's usually based on a pattern as opposed to a prefix or a suffix, even if the pattern sometimes includes a prefix or a suffix. Well, prefix and suffix, I hope, are all clear for everyone. The prefix is an addition at the beginning of the word or the stem, and a suffix at the end of it. And from there, we have the prefix conjugation and the suffix conjugation. which I hope is also clear for everyone because these were big topics in this course. So I hope everyone has internalized them. If not, feel free to ask. Just in a nutshell, a prefix conjugation is the verbal conjugation based on both prefixes and suffixes. That's maybe a little bit misleading. And the suffix conjugation based only on suffixes. But they're both used for verbal inflection in Semitic languages or Afro-Asiatic languages even. We also have the difference between a prefix and an infix. So a prefix comes before the stem while an infix comes inside the stem. In Semitic languages and in general, I think also an infix usually comes right after the first part of the stem. So it's much more like a prefix than a suffix. I don't know if an infix that comes right before the end, but maybe these exist as well, maybe broken plurals, I don't know. We've spoken a lot about Bart Ginsburg's law, or more than that, about vowel classes. So different inflections based on different vowels in these prefix and suffix conjugations of the G stem. And finally, the basic thing in Semitic languages and in Semitic morphology, specifically derivational mostly, that we take a root and we put it in a pattern to create a noun or an adjective, or in a stem to create a verb. Any question about Semitic morphology? After we have spoken about this so much. I don't have much to say about syntax, but we've seen a little bit of divergence in word order mostly, and a little bit in head modifier order. But yeah, it's not really my specialty. And the last thing to mention is some terms that we have spoken about in the context of semantics or semantic shifts, metaphor, metonymy, or synecdoche, I don't know, generalization, specification, and folk etymology. Maybe I haven't really mentioned all of these, but we have talked about the essential parts of how these things happen and why. Any question about this? We will have a forced break in 2 minutes, and I'm really thinking if we need it or just if you have any question. Otherwise, we can finish early. Please let me know what you thought about the course, how it was for you. If you have any remarks or suggestions, I would really, really love to hear, either here or via email or WhatsApp or whatever is best for you. I know I really, really enjoyed, and I hope you have as well.
I think it was really interesting, and I learned a lot about languages that I knew nothing about, especially like Ethio-Semitic and modern South Arabian languages. It could be like sometimes it was a bit much,
Yeah.
like a lot of paradigms. But all in all, I greatly enjoyed it and learned a lot, even though I, of course, don't remember everything. But it's good to have heard things so you can they exist.
I'm really happy to hear. So really, thank you so much. And if anyone else has anything to say, if not, that's okay as well. And hopefully I will see you around in Leipzig, maybe in April, I don't know. So thank you so much and have a great weekend.
You too. Was a good seminar.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.